Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. It's time to go through some, let's call it retro stuff when it comes to War Thunder. Vintage is probably a better word. One of the suggestions that came up in a tech talk a few weeks ago was the idea of doing a series of kind of War Thunder nostalgia. And I was thinking about the fact that I have a ton of stuff from over the years, since I've been making a lot of, videos over the years. Why not go through some of the old stuff to kind of show a pattern of what's going forward? So today what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at some dev server leaks that happened in 2021. So nearly 3 years ago to this day, since it happened in June of that year. So just to kind of give you a preface to this, what happened was there was a massive leak of vehicles on the dev server itself. It was absolutely insane, the actual amount that was leaked, and it must have been 30, 40, 50 vehicles, ranging from a bunch of different stuff, such as, of course, the C13 T90. You have, of course, the PVKV, which we now have in game. Even the Type 10 got leaked, along with stuff like the DF105. There was a bunch of these vehicles that were just around the place, and it's amazing to me how many of them still aren't in the game. And what was really nice about this leak, and I usually, there's not too many nice things about leaks because it means that there's obviously a crack in a system or somebody screwed up somewhere. But about this one, what was really cool is it showed how far ahead Gaijin actually planned for these things, and also maybe they might have plans for specific things, but they change over time. So remember that in your head. Remember that what has happened over the last few years is, a lot of these things that were in this leak here are now in the game, but there are a ton of stuff, which we're going to go through, which still isn't here. Some of it actually being leaked over 8 years ago to this day, compared to just even 3 years ago. There was the Swedish Huey, which was also in there, and this was before the Swedish helicopters was in the game, so it gave us an inkling of what was coming for them. And also, there was the Israeli Super Mystère, which people looked at and went, I wonder why there's going to be a camo for the French Super Mystère. And it turned out, hey presto, it was the Israeli aviation tree that was coming in. The same with when they updated the B-17 model. The first thing that came to people's minds was, well, why would they update that right now? It's been such a long time since they've updated it. It was using the model from, I believe, Wings of Prey or something like that over 10 years ago. And then they decided to update it. And hey presto, the next update or the update after, Israel comes. Like, some of these things are very obviously planned, and you just got to kind of put together a lot of the threads, which can be hard to do sometimes. Like, I didn't spot this one. I just thought this was a camo because I just couldn't believe Israel was coming in as an independent tree. But here we are, in War Thunder now, with Israel, of course, being an independent tree. But there's a bunch of other vehicles that still aren't in. The MDR, this was actually leaked twice, the MDR-6, it was leaked in a earlier form, and then also this one. So this one's been just around for ages, not really doing anything, probably ready to go. And also this and many others, like if we can just go through them, like the Welkin here. So this one, and two versions of the Welkin, by the way, have been kind of known about in the War Thunder community, that they're there, or that they're, mainly ready to go for many years now. They used to just keep planes in the asset viewer or just in the game files for a long time. There's some old setups for what they were going to add, like planned vehicles in the game, and we'll go through those in a different video as well. But it's just insane to think about how this plane in particular, plus the MDR, plus the other Welkin, have been around for maybe 8 or 9 years and still haven't made it. They will eventually, they'll come in. The only question is when. Because once you've made the assets, you're not really just going to sit them there and not do anything with. There was other stuff in this update for Britain, this dev server leak for Britain, stuff such as the Shackleton, which was another vehicle that was known about for a very long time and eventually came in. If you don't know about the Welkin, by the way, high altitude interceptor fighter. I did also do videos on all of these separate leaks. There was naval leaks, helicopters, aircraft, or airplanes, sorry, ground vehicles. I'll leave links in the description to all of them if you want to go see any of them. I go into detail about what they all are, and yeah, it's a lot more in there. Here, I just kind of want to show you the craziness of, you know, the leaks themselves, and also just how many of these vehicles we have to look forward to, even down to stuff like the Maryland, for example, which still isn't in the game, or the J5N2, where we actually have the J5N1 in, but the J5N2, with its Shrag music, still hasn't made it around. And this whole set of vehicles could easily just be an update, or maybe even 2 updates, and they've been petering a lot of these through like the last few updates. If you actually have a look at a lot of the ground ones, for example, from the leaks, many of them have actually made it into the game, but there's still a ton of aviation ones which are just kind of sat around, like the Spitfire Mark 7, the high altitude interceptor Spitfire. Isn't it really interesting how a lot of these are kind of high altitude interceptor vehicles, or, you know, more supposed to work at high altitudes, kind of similar to the same veins that we saw with the I-225, but they haven't been added, and now the meta, specifically of Air Realistic, is more go down and, you know, be more maneuverable. Maybe if they added a few more vehicles which were of that nature, maybe we would get a change. Probably not, though, just because of how generally people play. But it's at least interesting to think about how it could have shifted things if these were put in. But once again, we have another one. I believe this is the G5N2. Actually, I can't remember which one this is, so I apologize for that. But yeah, I think it's the G5N2. It's the upgraded version of the G5. It's either that or the G8N2, probably one or the other. And this kind of shows how they are also working on bombers, which is something we talked about yesterday, with a bunch of them probably coming in the future. It isn't just the fact that they don't care about bombers, they've been just focusing on strike aircraft and jets. One of the other vehicles that was in this leak list was actually an F-105, and also the A7, the A7E and an A4, showing that many of these vehicles have been added, which is nuts. These are just ones to kind of look forward to. When it comes to planes, you obviously had an F-89 variant as well, which just hasn't turned up either, which is just kind of sat around the place, and also some helicopters from good old Germany, which are more civilian, if anything else. Another vehicle that also just hasn't been anywhere in the game, but was here since the introduction of the Italian ground tech tree, of all things, is this Semavente. This is the Bergeslieri Semavente, and the only difference between it and a standard one is it has 3 machine guns on the top. It's just never made it into the game, and it has just a simple little change, and I don't know why it never made it. It's so odd. There are actually quite a lot of Italian vehicles that have just never made it for some reason, and no idea why. We're going to go into one later, which is just kind of nuts. But this one, it really is a simple one. Like, this could easily just be a tech tree one, a premium, could be like a little event one here and there. It is no different compared to the standard one, and maybe that's why it didn't make it. Maybe it didn't offer anything interesting. Maybe it missed its time, and it's just kind of sat there not really doing much. Hopefully, what we can see with these types of vehicles is, you know, a new kind of revolution in how all of this stuff works. It would be really nice, actually, to see a lot of these vehicles come in, maybe in a different way, or maybe just as like a squadron vehicle to try and filter them in. And of course, you have the Roycat Sam. Now, a lot of people over the years have actually asked, where is this thing? And it is kind of an interesting one. So this is a Roycat chassis with obviously some anti-air capabilities in the form of missiles. So you can see that it has the big old radar from the ZA-35 back there. And supposedly this one in real life never worked, so they never really got the whole system working together. But as we know in War Thunder, that doesn't really matter anymore, and it hasn't for a long time. We have a bunch of fake vehicles in the game, they have a bunch of attributes which they never had, or maybe were proposed to have but still didn't work. This is very much looking at naval, but also ground and aviation. So for stuff like this, I don't think the limiting factor is that it didn't exist, or it didn't, you know, work properly, because it did exist. It's just the fact that they haven't had time to add it. Maybe they have to model a specific system for it. I mean, I remember the missiles on this thing were different and unique compared to a lot of other stuff. And also, at the same time, think about this. If you design and build this vehicle, where would you want it in the tech tree? Well, the perfect place for this, if you actually have a look at the British tech tree, there are huge gaps in the AA at the high tiers, right? And they have been for a long time. The ZA-35 and the Chieftain Marksman leads into the Stormer, and there is a 2-whole BR gap between them, at least in arcade, which is just crazy when you think about it. And in realistic, it's the same deal. Then, if you have a look at the Stormer to the ADATs, you actually have a 1.3 BR gap, so 4 whole areas of BR, which are different. So this vehicle right here, the Roycat Sam, would be perfect to put into those, but it hasn't been put in yet. Interesting, right? Like how all of this generally works. So you have to think about why certain vehicles have been added and why haven't other vehicles been added, and why those two things are a case. And I think generally it's interesting to at least kind of cogitate and think about these things. Like this vehicle here, the PT7, we actually have a version of it in the French tech tree, the PT7 TAA, which has the quad 13.2s, but this one has either the dual 13.2s or maybe even less firepower. So yeah, even something as simple as this still hasn't made it, because maybe this is a vehicle that, okay, so we have an update, we have what we want its main bangers to be, it's all planned out, okay, let's throw in a few little vehicles here and there just to add to it as well. How this is how I see like setting up updates. All right, we have the Alpha Jet ready. That's really cool. We've been working on it for a long time. We want it to be kind of the main thing of this update. Also, the M60-120S, pretty cool as well. And the Mutsu, right? So we have all these bangers ready to go. Now, let's think about areas where we can fill to try and help out different nations. Okay, well, we've been working on AAs recently, so let's add stuff like the VTT DCA. Let's have a look at the Zastora, because a lot of people have been complaining about CAS. And then, okay, so now we just need some extra stuff to kind of add to the update to make people feel a bit better about it. Oh, well, we've got the T80UD, which is just, a T80 with a different engine. Oh, that sounds good, so let's throw that in. And this, to me, is one of those types of vehicles. It's one of those which is a filler vehicle, which isn't bad or isn't good. It's a fine one to put in the tech tree, but it's one which fills out an update. And a lot of these vehicles are like that, which is why you probably haven't seen them yet. And then we get on to the bangers. Now, one of the big things that this leak did, obviously a lot of people focused on the ground stuff, a lot of people focused on the air stuff, because, well, that's the majority of, the things that people care about when it comes to the game. There's also a bunch of other vehicles that we still haven't touched, like there's an A20 which was sat in the files too. But this vehicle here, this one kind of laid the ground for a few separate things. This is the Stalingrad, the battlecruiser, the Stalingrad. Now, this is still not in game. It is, though, in War Thunder. It is in War Thunder Mobile. So War Thunder Mobile is something which has obviously been developed alongside War Thunder. Enlisted is also something that's also developed alongside War Thunder, and a lot of Gaijin properties, the way that it works is Gaijin has a bunch of little teams which work on different stuff, communicate between each other, and work on stuff at the same time. That's why in Enlisted, for example, you got a lot of terrain deformation, and then in the next few updates afterwards, War Thunder also got it, because they're using the same engine, they're working on similar stuff, and they're working together, which is really cool. And, if you watch stuff like the Unreal Engine show, which we did the other day from Epic Games, you'll find that there's a lot of these little collaboration things which are happening between these dev teams, because basically, as usual, not just competition pushes people forward, but also cooperation, and that's something that Gaijin has done really well over the years. So this is the Stalingrad. It's in the War Thunder Mobile, along with a bunch of guided missile destroyers, and along with a bunch of submarines and other battle cruisers and battleships that aren't in the game. This thing also never really existed. It was a project that was never finished, But once again, in Naval, we already have a bunch of those things. So this is something to look forward to see in the future, and also to show even nearly 3 years ago, they were planning this far ahead. They were planning for Rank 6 Blue Water. They were planning for the modernization of battleships and battle cruisers. They already had all of these models ready to go. Maybe not all of them for every update. Maybe they have to work on some before they're added in, but the actual physical models of them were already bought and paid for and ready to go, which is just nuts. So you don't just have the Stalingrad, you also have the Genizer now, which is around the place too. There's also a Tirpitz, which is around the place. So just to show you how far ahead they're planning this stuff. They're planning it 4, 5, 6 years ahead. Like, it would be amazing if we see this vehicle this year, or the Stalingrad this year. I don't think we do. I think we see it next year or the year after. So that will be 5 years after these dev server leaks. And these vehicles are ready to go. Oh, well, maybe not ready to go, but the physical models are ready to go 3 years ago. Because remember, the physical model is just one part of the whole kind of like deal with these things. You actually have to model them in game and how they work in game, and also model all of the armor values, model everything. You know, the ships take a lot of work to set up. But this is how far ahead they're thinking. This vehicle was leaked in 2021. This vehicle probably won't come to the game until 2026, 2025. A whole 5-year plan, which is crazy to think about. And then once again, you just have some little bangers. You know, the Sparviero with, instead of the 76, I believe this has like dual 25s or dual 40s on it. And this one still hasn't come to the game either, because this is another one that you add as one of those bonus extra things that you get in each of the updates. You know how you get like one coastal vehicle an update, like the Dealey from last one, or when they added in stuff like the Blackpool or the Peacock or the Orla. The Orla was actually one which was leaked in this one as well, so the Orla came, but this one still kind of sat there. But once again, it's something that may come in when they decide to add in anti-ship missiles, because this vehicle, along with the other Sparvieros, could actually carry missiles on it. So that's something that you'll probably end up getting. Now, the story of this one is really interesting, because I might be wrong on this. Don't think I am. But this one still isn't in the game. This is the MS-74 Series 2A. And this story of this vehicle goes back to 2017. So remember, these leaks were in 2021. And they even did a dev blog. They did a dev blog for this vehicle in 2017. You can see here, 27th of October 2017. This was when Naval was more in its infancy, and the vehicle itself was completely modeled, ready to go, with its, you know, torpedoes, its depth charges, its quad 20 on the back, and everything else. I can't find this vehicle in the tech tree. I can't find it in the German tech tree or in the Italian tech tree. Now, remember, you know, I'm an old dude right now when it comes to these things, so I might be missing it. Maybe it is somewhere. We do have vehicles that are very similar, you know, stuff such as a lot of the S-boats for the Germans, and also for Italy we have a lot of stuff which is similar, but the only thing with a quad 20mm on it that I can find is one of the earlier vehicles from the Italians, which is the Vosper GIS 811, which has a quad 20 flak veiling on the back. So the fact that this is here, and from 2017 of all things, and it still isn't in the game, or it might be, I'm just blind, it's just nuts to think about. And it was leaked, you know, a few years ago again, even though it was already announced, like, 4 years before that. Which is just, what is going on? Like, it's so crazy to think about how far ahead these things are, and also just the decisions made. Now let's go into this. Just a little bit of fun at the end of the video. Welcome to the Mechs. Mechs were also kind of announced at the same time. You had a bunch of these guys which were around the place, and of course people thought April Fools, They thought, maybe some other stuff. But yeah, these things hopefully will come to the game at some point in the form of either a new game mode for a little bit of fun. I can imagine like Atomic Thunder or something like that, or maybe just an April Fool's event. I think it's time to go back to Mech War Thunder because, the last April Fool's event was so fun. But yeah, these are nearly 3 years old too. It's just crazy. It's absolutely crazy to have a look at all these things and think about the fact that some of them may not come for several years still, and some of them may come next week in an April Fool's event or in another event, especially now they've set everything up. Like, the time span of a lot of these changes and the thinking ahead that is done for a lot of this stuff really was pretty revolutionary when it came out, because it changed narratives. It completely changed how a lot of people saw many of these things. For years, I was arguing with people about the fact that you can't make these types of models. You can't make these things and get them into the game as quick as you think you can. The fact that Gaijin don't know what they're doing, the fact that they don't plan anything, they just toss everything around. Obviously, that was never the case, but this was physical evidence that that's obviously not what they do, right? And it meant that we had kind of a revolutionary time when it came to talking about these things, because that narrative died. And also, many other narratives over the last few years also have died. The idea that they don't listen, the idea that they don't respond. They've got a lot better at those things. And also, they've got a lot better at kind of like showing what's kind of going on the other side of things. Not fully, but also at the same time, you can't always show everything, all the cards in your hands. It's been really nice. And, there are still a lot of issues with the way that they do certain things. I definitely disagree with the way that they handle certain matters, especially since they make decisions basically where we'll call it primary, secondary, and tertiary. What they'll do is they'll tell you the tertiary or secondary reason why they're doing something, and they won't tell you the primary reason. And then when you say, well, was this a idea, why you decided to do this, or was this the primary reason? They turn around and go, well, we've made the public statement, have a look at that. And it's just complete obfuscation. But that, once again, is a story for another day. The fact that there's so many vehicles to look forward to, so many vehicles to even, see and go through is just fantastic. And over the next few weeks, we'll do one video a week looking at like an old video or looking at like an old interview that a member of Gaijin has done, just to show you how interesting the story of War Thunder as a game is, not just playing it itself. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day. I'll see you next time. I'd like to thank Schnitzel Stroker, Brendan Quinn, Vilneus, Character Fuel, Carrion Crow, Nicholas Richardson, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, B. Young, Opium Prime, Masonocrat, Lafouche, Alan Hacker, Sem Arslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.